In Overwatch, many players overestimate the importance of target focus, often blaming bad target focus for a range of issues. And this has led to a lot of misguided advice. For example, there are guides that detail target priority lists and have this weird list or flowchart of who to focus in a team fight. But if there's one thing you have to realize, it's that nobody plays a game like that. You have to realize that players will shoot what's easiest for them to shoot. There's no point in shooting a Widow on the other side of the map when there's a D.Va in the open for you to chip away at. And the Widow might be the more valuable target, sure, but if a target is too difficult to kill, there's no point in forcibly trying to kill them. Trying to kill targets you can't easily kill will reduce your damage output, reduce the overall pressure you're putting on the enemy, and gives the enemy more time to punish you. So what's the actual issue? A lot of the time when players blame target focus as an issue, it's often a case of your team going in aggressively, but nothing seems to be dying, so your team's target focus must be the problem, right? But there's a much simpler explanation for your issue. You're simply not setting up for the team fight correctly. Let's say you're playing a dive comp. You want to go into the back line and kill squishy targets, right? A lot of teams would just try to break in from the front, but this is ineffective for a number of reasons. In this example, if Winston, Tracer, and Echo try to just jump at the enemy from the front, it's easy for Break to stun Winston, it's easy for Ana to chip down or even sleep Tracer or Echo as they approach the backline, and D.Va only has to point her defense matrix in one direction to block damage coming from the DPS. No matter how much you chant Ana's name and desperately try to wish her into death, you will find it hard to secure the kill. You're simply not set up for it. You're not making Ana easy to kill, and I'm saying Ana because that's going to be your target out of Ana, Brig, and D.Va. Now, let's say instead you do your homework and set up Tracer and Echo on flanks while Winston jumps to the high ground behind them. Now suddenly everything is much easier. You're splitting their attention so that if they focus on one angle, they aren't accounting for the other two angles. Your Tracer does not have to hurriedly blink from the front to reach the back line, which means it is actually easy to go for the target of her choice. Your Echo can dish out a lot of damage, forcing the enemy D.Va to defense matrix her shots, but that means there isn't any left for Tracer. And don't forget the Winston just casually on the high ground ledge, behind the enemy, doing huge cleave damage, multiple target damage to the backline, and allowing his team to secure kills easily. But the most important part is, if you're setting up for these fights correctly, it doesn't really matter that much who you're focusing anymore. You're able to threaten and put pressure on multiple enemies at once instead of just one enemy. And no matter who you focus, you will force out abilities and eventually get a kill. Focus Ana, you force her to use abilities and soften her up for Winston to kill. You focus Brig, you force her to use Whip and Shield Bash in a desperate attempt to save her life, instead of to peel for her teammates. Focus D.Va even, the worst target, and you force her to use Defense Matrix selfishly, and you might even force her to run away from the fight. You will rarely have a situation where someone low gets escape with her life, because you're actually set up to confirm a kill on them. Target focus is only a big problem when you're setting up for fights poorly. Since it's so easy for the enemy to counter you, you kind of have to focus one target in a desperate attempt to clutch the fight. Or think about it this way. For example, as Tracer, you want to be focusing squishies and not tanks, right? But if all you're doing is bashing your head at the enemy front line, it's easy for their backline to anticipate and counter you, and you will have to use all your blinks just to get to the backline, leaving none for the actual duel. But if you do the smart thing and actually set up on a flank, then guess who's the easiest target to shoot? Anyone in the enemy backline. Remember when I said that players will shoot what's easiest for them to shoot? That's why Tracer is a flanker and not a frontliner. If Tracer actually wants to shoot squishies, she needs to be set up on an angle. But if she knows how to set up on angles well, target focus will be the least of her concerns. Why? Because the right targets are precisely the easiest ones to shoot. And that is not only limited to dive comps. Brawl and poke comps also want to have multiple angles so that they can create multiple threats and ultimately make the squishier targets easier to shoot and confirm kills on. Let's look at an example from the Overwatch League. Here, instead of going into Shox' Brawl comp from the front, as you can see, Fuel are going to set up their Winston and their DPS behind the enemy. And when Winston decides to engage, you tell me if Fuel has any target issues here. Right. Um, Now. No, on the contrary, it looked like the easiest fight ever. By setting up for the fight properly, Fuel get an easy team wipe without any difficulty. And don't get me wrong, Fuel were most certainly calling targets that fight. But because they set up for the fight correctly, they wiped everyone on the shock out. Target focus was simply not the deciding factor here, nor was it that Fuel had quote unquote better target focus than Shock that won them the fight. Good setup followed by good synchronized aggression won them this fight. So next time when you're looking at a scuffed team fight, don't think about whether you focus the right targets. Think about whether you actually set up to focus the right targets.